Nobody at the top of the Championship seems to want to run away with it, do they? Sunland, I honestly believe, have a massive opportunity in the next 5-6 days of the window to give them the best chance of getting top 2 as possible. So Sunland, you've got a great chance ahead of you. Please don't waste it. This is just a random video that I pretty much decided to do because I wanted to sort of get my, well, try to half organise my thoughts and sort of get it out there and get it to the point where it's out on YouTube, to be honest. And look, this might mount to absolutely nothing. We don't know what's going to happen in the last, what was it at the time of speaking, Tuesday, January the 28th. We've got 6 days left of the window, basically, which closes on the day we play Middlesbrough. But yeah. But I thought I'd do this video because I wanted to get my thoughts across, having watched Sheffield United play Hull, having obviously watched Sunderland drop 2 points against Plymouth, but having also watched Burnley and Leeds cancel each other out for a big 0-0 draw, which, by the way, for Burnley and Leeds, especially for Leeds, I think that is a really good point, considering that Sheffield United and Sunderland both failed to capitalise on the fact they were playing against each other. But I wanted to get my thoughts across, and I wanted to sort of stress just how big these next 6 days are for us, because if I'm looking at it, right, so for those of you who don't know the table, and I'll get it up on screen, but basically in the Championship table, Sunderland are currently 4th on 55 points. 2 points above them are Burnley on 57, with obviously a 9-goal better goal difference, but with a goal swings either way, that could be overturned. Sheffield United are currently second with plus 19 goal difference on 58 points, 3 points above Sunderland, and then Leeds atop the table with 60 points. And are 3 points clear of second, 5 clear of Sunderland, 2 clear of second, 3 clear of third, and 5 ahead of Sunderland. But I've watched enough. I think I've watched each of the teams enough now to sort of gauge an opinion on how I think Sunderland, despite Saturday, and don't get me wrong, I'm not going to dress up how poor a result Saturday was, because it really, really was poor. And although I do think Plymouth definitely warranted the point that they got, it doesn't mean that we can't be annoyed with the fact that they ended up getting the point instead of us seeing the game out at 2-1. But I think the Breeze, as I said before, I've done that bit on the video. Look, to be honest, I probably might have overreacted a little bit. And believe me, because I've got a semi-decent following on here, to some degree I feel like I've got a responsibility to not overreact and to not, even in the heat of the moment, regardless of how soon after full time it is, to try and keep the bigger picture in perspective and to try and remind fans that we are still in a very, very good position. It's just if we'd won on Saturday, it would have been a fantastic position, really, to be honest. But look, at the end of the day, my one slight concern about the table is how many points clear will Sheffield United and Burnley in particular be by the time we play against Middlesbrough? Because obviously we play on Monday night after everybody else. Burnley go to Portsmouth and Sheffield United go to Derby. Now, I'm begging that Portsmouth and Derby have the game of their lives this weekend and both pick up at least a point, but being honest, I'd be very, very astonished if that did happen. But I wanted to sort of come across and sort of point out to people that, look, whether you think we're going to finish in the top 2, for me, quite frankly, I don't really care. And everyone's got their own opinion. Personally, I don't think we'll finish in the top 2 either, but it doesn't mean we don't have a chance. We really, really do. And I think if you're just looking at the table and if you're looking at how everybody else is playing, then I think there is a genuine opportunity here for Sunderland to get automatic promotion. Now, personally for me, last night, at the time of speaking on the day after the Burnley-Leeds game, I said that I wanted Leeds to win the game. And I can understand why people had different opinions on what they wanted the result to be in that match. But what I wanted to come across was, in my head, I honestly, and I know the table doesn't show it, but if you look at all the underlying metrics, if you look at the quality that they've got, if you look at the way that they play football, out of Leeds, Burnley and Sheffield United, I think Leeds are easily the best of the 3 teams. And while Leeds didn't look anything special against Burnley, a part of me believes that was because they were happy with a point away at Burnley, knowing that Sheffield United and Sunderland, neither of them managed to win. And I think a point away at Burnley, it keeps the gap at 3 points. And I think that's why I think that while a draw is a good result for Burnley as well, I think it's a better draw for Leeds. Because I think if you look at it, Leeds have had a week where they've just beaten Sheffield 3-0, they've beaten Norwich 2-0, and they've kept 3 clean sheets with a 0-0 at Burnley. And I think we would do exceptionally well to finish above Leeds. And for me, the only reason that Leeds aren't clear at the top of the table is because of Ilan Meslier in goal. And don't get me wrong, I don't think he's the worst keeper in the world. I think for every clanger he makes, there's 2 or 3 really good saves he makes. But you can't deny that there is that mistake in him, and that's why they're not clear. But they've also got the second best defence, but obviously behind Burnley, which I'll get to in a moment. But after I've gone to Leeds, I'll go through Sheffield United and Burnley in turn, tell you what my quick thoughts are on both of them, and then go into Sunderland. But honestly, with Leeds, I mean, Leeds are easily, by some way, the top scorers of the top four. I know the second top goal scorers, I believe, are Norwich, which is weird because they're in 11th, but they've got 48 goals. Middlesbrough have got 47. But if you're talking in teams of just the top four, Leeds are comfortably the best in terms of scoring goals. They've scored 11 more goals than Sunderland. They've scored 13 more than Sheffield United. And they've scored 17... Hang on, have I got this right? 17 more goals than Burnley, which is mental. When you actually look at how the quality of the top teams at the top, it is ridiculous. But for me, I think Leeds, at home especially, will go on to win 9 games out of 10 that they have left. I think they might have 10 or so home games left. If they don't win most of them, I will be staggered. Because I think Ellen Road is going to be a really tough place for everyone to go. I think it's only Burnley that have gone there and won this year. And this is where I think Sunland will be in for a big task when we go to Ellen Road. But if we go for it and push that a little bit harder in the next 6 days of the window and get a couple of really quality additions, plus with getting players back, there is absolutely no reason for me why we aren't capable of going there and getting a result. I'm not necessarily saying a win, but we're capable of going there and maybe getting something. But there you go. So that's Leeds for you. For me personally, I think Leeds, I would be staggered. And it would take a monumental cock-up, to be honest, for Leeds to not be in the top 2 at the end of the season. I know Leeds fans are worried about doing the Leeds, or Leeds are falling apart again, like a lot of people like to say. But honestly, I think Leeds are the best team by some way of the 3. Now, you look at Sheffield United, who are in second. Now, if I'm being totally honest, and again, this could, by the way, for Sheffield United and for Burnley in particular, this could all change in the next 6 days of the window, just like it can with Sunderland. You've got to be consistent. But when I've watched Sheffield United, I'm telling you now, I've watched Sheffield United about 10 games this season. I've watched them. I watched them obviously twice against what was it? I watched them twice against Hull. I watched them twice against Sunderland. I watched them against Leeds. I watched them against Borough, Coventry, Bristol City, West Brom, and Millwall. And those games in particular, I remember vividly watching. Now, at best, people might think, well, have I picked Sheffield United's 10 worst games of the season? I have no idea. Maybe I have done. But I've watched, out of the 29 games they played, I've watched a third of them. I've watched enough of them, I think, to make an opinion. And honestly, yes, I'm a little bit jealous they've signed Tom Cannon, because I did want Tom Cannon here, but I fully appreciate while they're a parachute club, and obviously they've just been taken over, and obviously we're not a parachute club, and it's not an excuse for Sunderland, it's just a fact. We are not a parachute club. We were never going to be able to we were never going to go and offer 10 million plus, like what Sheffield United were able to do. But what I would say with Sheffield United is, of the 10 games that I've mentioned, now again, just to reiterate, twice against Hull, twice against Sunderland, Middlesbrough, Leeds, Bristol City, Coventry, West Brom and Millwall. I've watched them against West Brom away, Millwall away, I should say. I've watched them in all of those games, and at best, I've been impressed with them on maybe 2 occasions. I think away at Hull they were pretty good and definitely deserved to win in the end. And I think away at Millwall they deserved to win because they shut Millwall down excellently. And they're an example, funnily enough, and probably them and Burnley are an example of what I'm on about when it comes to clean sheets. But I would say that with Sheffield United, more times than not, I think it's been a case with Sheffield United where they've had 2 shots on target and scored 2 goals across the whole game. Or they have scored 1 goal and then the opposition have missed really good chances against them in order to get something out of the game. And I think there was a game that stood out to me among Sheffield United's performances. Well, there's a couple of them. One was away at Leeds, when it was clear as day to me, and it sold to me that Leeds are a better team than Sheffield United by some way. And Leeds are much better than Sunderland by some way, I think, by the way, to be fair, for the sake of consistency here. But Leeds should have won 5-6-0 that night when Leeds paid them at Ellen Road. Honestly, I think if they won 4-5-6-0, I don't think there genuinely could have been any complaints from anybody on either side of their fan bases in that game. Then you look at Bristol City away. Now this was the day before Sunderland went to Preston in November. And I remember distinctly watching it when I was at my auntie's house with my 2 cousins. Well, my cousins weren't watching the game with us. I was keeping an eye on it. And Bristol City were better than them for about 88 minutes. This is the thing. But Sheffield United, to be fair, I mean, don't get me wrong. It is, and to be fair to Sheffield United, if I was saying this about Sunderland, I've got to say it about them. It is the sign of a good team when you're winning, when you're not at your best. But there does come a point where it keeps happening so often that it's not just winning and being a good team anymore. A lot of it is down to not luck, but being a little bit fortuitous, which I know might contradict myself and sounds like the same thing. But I think Sheffield United, more often than not, when I've watched them, have been quite fortunate to get the results that they have done. And apparently there's even a few Sheffield United fans on social media. And again, it's not the biggest barometer, like what Graham Fox says, funnily enough. By the way, give the What the Folk podcast some love for some of the stick that they've got in recent weeks. And if you're one of these people that are giving them stick, quite frankly, go and screw yourself, because it's not acceptable. But anyway, the point is, they were saying, Graham says, it's not a big barometer, but I just wanted to point it out. Sheffield United, when I've watched them, have more times than not been pretty bang average. Now, the one thing I think Sheffield United might have over Sunderland is the fact that they are probably better equipped in terms of mastering the dark arts, and that might end up getting them over the line in the top two, to be fair to them. And I do rate Tom Cannon for this level, and I do rate Ben Brereton Diaz for this level. So it's not like they're a bad team. Callum O'Hare, Gustavo Hamer, Tyrese Campbell, there are amongst countless other ones. Souza, there are other examples of players that I think are really, really good. Harrison Burrows being another one. Michael Cooper, the goalkeeper. They've definitely got some really good players, and they've only scored 2 less goals than what Sunland have. But when I've watched Sheffield United, I'm convinced that Sunderland can get them. And if you look at the games we played against them, away from home, I don't think we deserve to win at Bramall Lane, but I think there's a strong argument that we definitely shouldn't have lost the game. We should have got a point at the end, and we had the chances in the first half to go 2-3-0 up. At the Stadium of Light, I know there was an argument that Sheffield United had more of the ball, but in general, I felt in terms of clear-cut chances, Sunderland were easily the better side by some distance. And I thought that night, personally, we deserved to win, but maybe I'm looking at it through Sunderland-tinted specs. Then you come on to Burnley. Now, Burnley's the weirdest one of the lot of them, because Burnley have only let in 9 goals, which, don't get me wrong, that is absolutely outstanding, and that is the sort of level of defence I would love Sunderland to have, while maintaining and balancing that with the attacking style of what we do tend to have when we do want to play football. That sounds harsh, but you know what I mean. When we're at our best and we're free-flowing, I'd like that to be balanced with Burnley's level defence. And if you do that, you're comfortably top of the league, aren't you? But this is the thing with Burnley, and this is coming from someone who, excuse me language, calls myself clean sheet wanker. I take the mick out of myself. Even I'm saying this, and if I'm saying this, there's got to be something in this. I don't think Burnley across the whole season will score enough. And there's a reason I say that. Now, you might look at the table and go, well, hang on a minute, there's 36 goals they've scored in comparison to Sunderland's 42. What do you mean they won't score enough? Let's put a bit of context into it. If you remember before the game at the Stadium of Light, and by the way, quickly on the 2 performances against Burnley, Sunderland deserved to win by some distance, regardless of whatever was happening at Burnley. Sunderland deserved to win when we played Burnley at the Stadium of Light, and I used to think that a draw at Turf Moor was fair when we went there. I've changed my mind. If you go and watch Alt Ending's video of the game at Turf Moor, that persuaded me otherwise. In the second half, we were all over Burnley, and we absolutely deserved to win the game, and should have done with the 2 missed penalties. At least one of them, especially the second one, should really have got in. Thanks, James Trafford. But, at the end of the day, I would say with Burnley, if you're looking at their season so far, before the game against us, when they sold a fair few players, I think it was Dara O'Shea being one of the main ones. There was another couple of them that were sold as well. But before they sold a fair few players, they scored 9 goals in the first 2 games, with a 4-1 win away at Luton and a 5-0 win at home to Cardiff. And even then, the 5-0 against Cardiff, from what I'm hearing at the time, flattered Burnley. They weren't exactly great. Now, the point is, 9 of those goals were across the first 2 games. 5 of them, albeit we didn't beat them at the week, shockingly didn't beat them at the weekend, but 5 of them also came away at Plymouth. Now, if you look at it, across those 3 games, that's 14 of their goals that are chalked off. Now, I know you can't remove the goals, I know you can't remove the games, and I agree with you, you're absolutely right if you're coming up with that argument, because Burnley still scored the goals, it doesn't mean they don't count, absolutely, but to make the point I'm making, and if this was Sunderland, I think some of our fans would be saying this about us, so we have to be consistent and say it about other teams as well. 14 of Burnley's 36 goals were scored across 3 games. So those 3 games out of 26, they played 29 games. So take the 3 games I've just mentioned out of it. Out of the other 26 games, Burnley have scored 22 goals across 26 other games. That is averaging less than a goal a game. And for me, while Burnley's defence is absolutely fantastic, and you can see with the likes of Egan Riley and Esteve at the back, why they're keeping so many clean sheets, and it's really, and believe me, that is not a bad thing. And again, it's the same with the 3 games. Scoring 5 goals against Plymouth's not a bad thing. Scoring 4 away at Luton's not a bad thing. Scoring 5 against Cardiff's not a bad thing. But I think Burnley will by some way, by the end of the season, have scored the least amount of goals out of the top 4 in terms of the battle for automatic promotion. And as well, another one, Burnley have had quite a lot of 0-0 draws this season. Off the top of my head, if I'm right, I think they've had a 0-0 draw away at Oxford. They've had a 0-0 draw at home to QPR, at home to Derby, at home to Preston, at home to Stoke, away at Middlesbrough, away at West Brom, at home to Sunland, and at home to Leeds. Now, West Brom, Middlesbrough, Sunderland and Leeds draws are fine. But if you look at the other 5 0-0s they've had, Oxford, Preston, Stoke, Derby and QPR. And this is where, for me, with Burnley, I do have a little bit of hope, because I reiterate, like with Sheffield United, anything can happen in the next 6 days. But what I wanted to address was, Burnley, I believe this season at home in particular, I wouldn't be surprised if they draw quite a few home games 0-0, especially against sides. I mean, against the likes of, I think they've got Sheffield United to play third last game of the season when we place Blackburn on Easter Monday. Now, that's fair enough. Draws like that, or Sunderland, or Leeds, or West Brom, or Borough, they're fine. Their draws against sides in the top 6, they're fine. And if you look at it, the only game they've lost against sides in the top 6 was away at Sunderland. So they've clearly done something right there. But it's when you're drawing it at 0-0 at home, again to the likes of QPR, to the likes of Stoke, to the likes of Derby, to the likes of Preston, and away at the likes of Oxford. Games like that are what could end up costing them in terms of 0-0 draws. Yes, once or so often it happens. But again, a third of their games have ended 0-0 this season. And that's where I'm thinking. I think that, and they didn't score away at Millwall either. So in a tenth of Burnley's games, they haven't found the back of the net, and again, this is coming from someone who is massive on clean sheets and being good defensively, and I still largely stand by it. I would have liked Sunland to have kept a few more at this point, but if I'm being harsh, hypercritical on the top 2 standards, but I would back us to score more goals than Burnley across the remaining, 17 games left. I would back Burnley maybe to lose less than Sunderland, but I would probably back Sunderland to win more than Burnley at the moment, again, depending on what happens in the next 6 days. If Burnley go out and sign a couple of really good attacking players, then obviously that changes things, but as of right now, at the time of recording, before I've heard anything that's happened, I wouldn't be shocked if Burnley scored the least amount of goals out of the top 4. So this leads on to Sunderland. Now, we've already signed Enzo Lefebvre, a signing which a lot of people, not just Sunderland fans, but a lot of fans of world football or in the Championship, or other Championship fans, seem to be quite envious of, or seem to be of the opinion that that is a signing that we should never have pulled off. Now, in the first 3 games, what I've seen of Enzo Lefebvre, I've liked a lot of him. And if you look at it, actually, if Wilson Isidore kept his composure against Burnley, he'd have an assist by now. If there was some better movement in the box against Plymouth, because I thought Lefebvre in the first half against Plymouth was really, really good. Better final third movement. He probably has an assist there as well. And you've got to remember, he's playing on the left because Mundell and Watson had to come back. Now, Sunderland, for me, the biggest problem we've had is when, for me personally, and I'd be keen to know what anyone else's fans are, as long as they're respectful about it in the comments, but whenever anyone's done anything against Sunderland, I think it's been because it's because of Sunderland's inflicted mistakes. Self-inflicted errors are what have ended up doing it, more times than not. Obviously, a goal like, say, for example, what was a really good goal someone scored against us, or a well-worked one? Oh, I'm trying to think now. Let's say, for example... Oh, God, I'm putting myself on the spot. Okay, say the first goal away at Watford, for example. Actually, I think even that might have come from giving it away. But my point is, a lot of the goals we've conceded this season have come through Sunderland being stupid, quite frankly, and have come through being not necessarily sitting back, but more... We've given the ball away sloppily in midfield. We haven't dealt with the attack well enough coming against us. It's these. If we can cut out these little self-inflicted errors, and if we could defend better much better in the last 10, 15 minutes of games, because we've dropped something like 11 points in the last 10 minutes of games. The 2 in recent ones that stand out are the equaliser against Plymouth and the winner at Stoke. They're the 2 that have annoyed me the most, because if, say, for example, you swap them round, say if you draw at Stoke and you beat Plymouth, extra 3 points, you're above Burnley and probably above Sheffield United as well. So that comes back to the point. But despite us being really off colour at the weekend, and we were really, really poor for the standards that we've set, we still gained a point on Sheffield United. Again, I'm not going to dress up the result against Plymouth, but it doesn't change the fact we were 4 points behind them going into the weekend. We ended it a point closer to them. And we didn't lose ground on Burnley and Leeds. Now, but this brings me on to the point that I've said, as the title says, this is a massive week ahead for us. I firmly believe if Sunderland really push the ball out, again, without being stupid, obviously, because I am a big fan of being sustainable and watching what you spend, we have to. It's FFP and PSR, whatever it is a real thing. But either way, if we push the ball out a bit harder, I'm not saying the board, because I do believe the board want to get promoted, but me and my friend were discussing this watching the Burnley Leeds game last night. To what extent? How badly do they want it? And again, I reiterate this. I have to say this repeatedly to re-emphasise the point. I'm not meaning go out and spend 7 million on one player or 5 million on another player or anything like that, but just 2 extra, maybe even loan deals, or if you can find some good value bargains elsewhere. Players, okay, maybe I'm going to go delusional here, but say someone like Jack Clark back on loan, or Tariq Lamptey from Brighton as a right back, because I'm staggered we're not looking at another full back. I know there's the argument of, oh, 9 can play there, but then you're taking him out of centre-half, and then you need another centre-half there. I want us... And a lot of the reason I'm saying these things is because I want Sunland to have the best chance of getting automatic promotion. Because I've now seen enough to believe we are capable of finishing in the top 2. Regardless of Saturday's result, we are capable across the whole season of finishing in the top 2. Look at the way we played against Sheffield United across both games. Look at the way we played against Burnley. Burnley in particular across both games. Both games, we were by some way the better team in both games. Maybe not the first half at Turf Moor, because they were pretty decent in the opening 25 minutes. But the last hour, Sunderland were the better team as we grew into it. So, Leeds are the only one out of the teams above us that have genuinely caused us a lot of problems that weren't of our own doing. So, I think to try and round the video up, because I realise I've waffled on for nearly 20 minutes here. But my point is, if Sunderland really push the ball out, again, like say another couple of really good quality loan deals or whatever else it is, then I believe we've got a great chance as any of finishing second at least. Because I do believe Leeds will go on to win the league. And part of me, for that very reason, wanted Leeds to beat Burnley last night. But I think you'll do very well to finish above Leeds. But, and this doesn't mean we definitely will, it doesn't definitely mean we will finish above either of them, but I've seen nothing from Burnley or Sheffield United to suggest to me that we can't finish above either of them. But it all to some degree, it hinges for me on 2 things. Either 1, what we do in the rest of the window, or 2, what happens with Mundell and Watson coming back, or with Alan Brown coming back, and what we end up doing from that position onwards. Now, I'll quickly say, for example, Jack Clarke, right? Now, I know there are some fans that definitely wouldn't have him because they didn't like the fact that he left to go to Ipswich, or they don't want to block the progression of Mundell or Watson. And while to an extent I get that, but just for context, Romain Mundell's injury was a particularly bad one because hamstring injuries, particularly for players as quick as he is, are really awkward to deal with because you don't want to have to rush him back, because if you do that, you risk running him out for the rest of the season and potentially even longer than that. Watson as well. Now Watson, I think has done really well. I think both of them have done really well. And I'm not saying we'll get Jack. I don't think we'll get Jack Clarke on loan, by the way. But just as an example, if you get someone like that and you're adding that extra bit of depth, you don't have to rush Mundell back. It means that you are taking care of Watson a little bit more. And as well, you got to look at it. Again, I don't think it'll happen. But if, say, for example, Ipswich, they've got Enciso from Brighton, I think it is, and they've got Philogene from Aston Villa. Is Clarke going to get in ahead of them two when he's barely been playing all season? No, probably not. And by playing all season, I mean starting games for Ipswich. I don't think he's been having that many starts for them. So the point is, and it would be good for Ipswich to protect their investment, to get him playing and get his value up again. It would be good for Clarke to go somewhere where he clearly was happier, because he doesn't seem very happy at Ipswich. And it's good for Sunland because we're getting a really good quality winger and we know what we're getting. Now, but even if you want to say it's not someone like Jack Clarke, even if it was someone like Emil Rees from Preston, for instance, where, yes, he might not get in ahead of Isidore, but he's a focal point, and I'll be very confident in saying, barring anything silly or a wonder goal from Plymouth, if we had Emil Rees on the bench and when Isidore comes off, if Rees comes on to replace him, I'll be very surprised if Sunderland drop points from that game. So, and another thing, because there's an argument from some, the last point I'll make before ending the video is, there's some fans that go on about, well, if you're not going to get in the team ahead of our current players, then why sign them? And while they're entitled to that opinion, to be honest, I'm getting quite fed up of hearing that, because it's a squad game. It's about not just the start 11. It's about the depth. It's about coming off the bench. It's about having as many options as possible to come off the bench. I'm promising you now, the standard at the top of the Championship, in comparison to what it was last year, and last year I am aware was freakishly good for the Championship, but this year, it's by comparison, it pales. There is nobody. Leeds are probably the closest to them, and even they were probably 60-75% of the team that they had last year. This league is so open at the top, and I do believe, and to be clear, I do believe Sunderland are trying very hard to get players over the line in the end of this window. I do believe Sunderland are trying to go for a higher calibre of player than what a lot of Championship clubs are going for. But if you look at it, Leeds haven't done very much in the window from what I'm aware of. Burnley at best have signed, John Joe Shelvey? Sheffield United, granted, have signed, Chowdhury, Cannon, Brembert and Diaz, and they're solid signings, I think. But again, but when I watch Sheffield United, I'm not overly convinced with them. I'm not going to write off Cannon and Brembert and Diaz just off the Hull game the other day, by the way, because for all we know, that could be a blip for them. Or it could be that they need to settle in again. Well, again, in the case of Brembert and Diaz, or settling full stop ahead of, say, Tom Cannon. But the point is, if Sunderland really went out and pushed the ball out just that little bit more, but again, without going stupid, I honestly believe we can get top 2. I really believe we can get it. So, look, to end the video, I wanted to get these thoughts out, and just getting them out has made us feel a bit better about the whole thing. Yes, last night's result between Burnley and Leeds made the Plymouth game less and yet more frustrating at the same time, because while it wasn't catastrophic, the result itself was awful, but the situation isn't catastrophic in that we're still 3 points off second. But what it could have been, we should be 1 point off second, really. But either way, over to you, KLD, and over to you, Christian Speakman and Stuart Harvey. How much are we willing to push that little extra mile to give us the best chance of automatic promotion this season? Because we've got a team, when everybody's fit, is good enough to go and do it, compared to, say, Burnley and Sheffield United. I've seen nothing from Burnley and I've seen nothing from Sheffield United that make me think they will definitely finish above us. They might do. Both of them might finish above us. And if you're asking me right now, do I think we'll get top 2? No, I probably don't. But there's no reason why we can't do it. Leeds, I think I'd be very surprised if we finish above them. But we'll wait and see. It's a big 6 days left of the window. Let's see what happens. But what do you guys think below? I just want, and sorry guys, there's no structure to this video, but I just wanted to sort of really I really wanted to just get it across. But anyway guys, if you're watching the video and you're not a regular sub and you think I've earned it from you, and I think it was about over 60% of people that are watching are not subscribed. So if you think I've earned it from you, hit the sub button. That'd be massively appreciated. Let's try and get the channel up to 6k subscribers by the end of the season, and let's see what happens. Take care, you lovely lot, and unless we make signings between then, the next time I'll see you is the Borough game, I guess. Stay safe, everybody, and as I always end the videos on, how are the lads?